Hi, I'm Barton Janke, a.k.a. the Elwood Whisperer. You're listening to U.S. Modernist Podcast with George Smart. Enjoy.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. I'm Tom Guild. Nowhere in the world celebrates modernism better than Palm Springs, California. Every February, they have a huge architecture and design festival called Modernism Week, which has been going on like about 20 years now?
15.
Okay. It actually now lasts 11 days. It's kind of grown. This was the 5th year U.S. Modernist has been at Modernism Week, talking poolside at the hip Hotel Skylark with nearly everybody there, keynote speakers, authors, and special guests. It's a tough job, but hey, it's our sacred architectural duty to serve the martinis.
Resistance is futile.
We do so with pride and honor. This is my second time I've come to Modernism Week, and this time I got to visit Lawrence Welk's house.
Oh, yeah.
It was one of the first modernist houses built in Palm Springs, and he kind of redecorated, but then they undecorated it and restored it. And the funniest part, among many other things, is the person who owns it now has in the bar a bottle of Geritol.
Really? Because he always advertised Geritol on the show,
They were his
right?
longtime sponsor, Geritol. And you know what? I sniffed it. It smells awful.
Oh.
So it's good for display, but not for consumption.
Yeah, I wonder how old that bottle is.
It was in the spirit.
If you're into mid-century modern, Modernism Week is the Woodstock, the Olympics of all the architecture we love, an event not to be missed. When you wish upon a star, you're not going to go to Disney. You're going to end up next to Frank Sinatra's pool in Palm Springs. Because Modernism Week is just the best spectacle of mid-century architecture, shopping, art galleries, lectures, architecture movie premieres, amazing parties at incredible modernist houses, and great exhibits all through the week. One of the things you can also do in Palm Springs, if you're not from the state of California or Texas, I believe, is you can make a pilgrimage to one of the most famous burger chains in the world, the In-N-Out Burger.
Oh, yeah.
So delicious.
Yep.
So delicious. It's right on the edge of town near the highway I-10. And you go in, and if you don't get there before about 10:30 in the morning, there's going to be a line that does not go away all day and into the night.
You have to understand, George, you're explaining this for East Coasters because West Coasters probably already know all this stuff.
Yeah, they know In-N-Out Burger.
And all the secret menu things.
There's a secret menu. You can go online and you can look up the In-N-Out Burger secret menu. These are things that you can order at the counter, but they're not going to be on the display board behind the counter. A whole variety of different ways to make your burger special.
Yeah.
It's pretty incredible. You got to make a little trip out there. If you'd like to go with us in 2021 and stay at the swanky U.S. Modernist compound, complete with our own private bar and some of the best breakfasts in town, email me at george@usmodernist.org. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Nichiha.com/USModernist and by modernist realtor Angela Roll.
In a story that we are largely making up, modernist realtor Angela Roll worked her way through college, dancing like no one's watching to Mambo No. 5 and brilliantly flipping Neutra houses, sometimes simultaneously. At age 22, following a celebrity-filled party at a famous hillside modernist house in L.A. involving late-night swimming, fig-infused goat cheese, absolute lime, and a new use for graphite. Huh? Angela was recruited to architecture school. There, she spent years in sleep-deprived design studios. Now she's a modernist real estate agent with specialized design training advising buyers and sellers on everything from appropriate renovation to staging a martini party for 200 from 2,800 miles away. That's absolutely true. Reach her at angelaroll.com. That's ROEHL, or call her 919-995-0550.
Thank you, Tom. If there's one entertainer who finds their way into everyone's home, and certainly their heart, in Palm Springs, either through a print or a painting or music playing in the living room or out by the pool, it's Frank Sinatra.
Amen.
I had a blast out there interviewing Frank's granddaughter, A.J. Lambert, who had just released a debut album and performed to great reviews at 2019 Modernism Week. But there's another person who's tightly woven into the spirit of Modernism Week and mid-century culture, Hollywood star Marilyn Monroe. Sometime in 2020, there's a nearly 30-foot-tall statue of her in the famous blowing white dress that will return to Palm Springs, I believe, permanently as a home. In her day, Marilyn was as big as any celebrity you could name. She was involved with some of the most well-known men in the world, baseball great Joe Dimaggio, playwright Arthur Miller, and generally accepted nowadays, President John F. Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
And she has a connection to a very famous architect you'll learn about. Today, we will talk with three people who keep Marilyn's legacy alive for the 21st century. First, it's Sunny Thompson, who has been channeling Marilyn for her live shows and completely brings her back to life. Next, Greg Schreiner has one of the world's largest collections of Marilyn's costumes and also leads the annual memorial service in Los Angeles. And finally, Joshua Greene, son of photographer Milton Greene, who took some of Marilyn's most memorable photos. And Marilyn was also Joshua's babysitter. Wow.
What?
Let's go now to Palm Springs. So where do you live right now?
I live in Seattle, Washington.
In Seattle?
Right.
Okay, that's a town known for modernism.
Well, yes, it's known for just about everything and internet, everything that's computer related and Amazon related and Google and the rest,
And the Space Needle.
The Space Needle and Expedia. It's booming right now. It's a booming place to live, and real estate's through the roof.
I hear that. Mm-hmm. I hear it's getting to be like L.A.
Yeah, very much so.
With all the tech up there.
You really think about when you're going, where you're going. You schedule all your doctor's appointments at certain times of the day so you can get there, on time. It's crazy. But we walk to work. We're lucky. We walk to work faster than we can drive, so we have our offices really close to our home. So
that's nice.
Very lucky.
Now, how does this compare to, say, Branson?
Branson is a whole different market. Branson is very down home and very theater related. Everything around is based. It's the business. When I was there, it was the business. It's the central business, and so everybody was always very focused, laser focused on whatever was happening in the shows and with the show people. So as a performer, it's a gift to go there because they love you so much and they appreciate you and they really champion whatever you're doing, and you get a lot of attention and accolades and all that kind of stuff. So it's really kind of fun, and I enjoyed it tremendously. There's a great show world, a great world of show people down there. There were when I was there more so because it was really in its heyday.
Yeah, I remember it was just like everybody was talking about Branson and everyone wanted to have a theater.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so many stars had theaters there, and Andy Williams was there, and
Jim Stafford had a theater for a long time.
Yeah, he was very popular, Jim Stafford, and people you don't even know.
Little known trivia, former husband of Bobby Gentry.
Oh, really?
The singer, yes.
Oh,
you know
I knew Bobby
Tallahatchie Bridge?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I knew that she was married to Bill Hara, but I didn't know she'd been married to Jim Stafford. I didn't know that.
They had a child together.
Oh, I'll be darned. Learn something new every day.
So how did you start developing a show about women, and was Marilyn Monroe your first subject, or did you have other people first?
Actually, it goes back to when I was transitioning out of Branson. I started kind of working on my impressions with Dolly Parton.
Okay.
Actually, she was my first. And I loved her so much. I loved her. I loved how she dressed and just over the top and hair and makeup. And I loved her.
There's a great Dolly Parton meme going around now. Have you seen that? The one where she has 4 photos, and one says Facebook, and the other one says Twitter, and one says Instagram, and one says...
YouTube, probably.
Yeah. And they have different personalities of her in the pictures. It's really great. You should look it up.
Oh my gosh, she's had a career.
Yeah.
She's had a career. Well, it costs a lot to look this cheap, And I love doing her. And so I've spent a good deal of time, with her and listening to her. She does her audio books, and they're so much fun. And
there's Dollywood, of course, in Tennessee.
And I've been there. I got out of the car when I was in Branson, and we visited, and everybody thought I was her. At that point, I wear my hair more like her and that kind of thing. So I really just love her so much. And I've seen her lots of times in concert and I've met her and that kind of thing. So I really, really love her very, very much. And she's just a great lady. And that sense of humor is just amazing.
And so what led you from Dolly to doing Marilyn most of the time?
Marilyn I was actually doing Dolly, and Greg wrote, my husband Greg, wrote for my stage
There's
show.
a random man sitting here. I assume it's your husband, Greg.
Yeah, it's my husband, Greg Thompson, and he's a producer.
Yes?
And he produced my casino shows, my stage shows. And he wanted me to start doing these impressions for comedy, for a comedy element to the show. And they were short, they were fast, they were fleeting. I told a couple of jokes, and they were a fun part of the show. So I did Mae West, Dolly Parton, Joan Rivers, and whoever the blonde du jours were, whether it was Madonna was big at the time,
right,
or maybe it was Gwen Stefani, who was real hot now. So that kind of changed. And that's where it all began. And I started doing Marilyn, and I put the Marilyn wig on. And I had long blonde hair at that point, and he had never thought of me as Marilyn. And years and years ago, in the 80s, he wrote a one-woman play about Marilyn and never had time to produce it because his production company was really going gangbusters at the time. And he never thought he found someone who could really play the part. He didn't have the time to focus on it, all that kind of stuff. So he saw me in the blonde wig, and we were married at that point, and he said, I never thought of you as Marilyn before, but wow.
You can see it now.
And it was funny because when I did her on stage, the audience reacted. The audience reaction, I thought it was just because it was Marilyn, and it is because it's Marilyn. I mean, you tell a room of Rotary guys that Marilyn's going to show up to their Rotary that day, and everybody's like, oh my God, Marilyn's going to be here. Everybody's all aflutter.
I'm sure it's 100% attendance.
Yep, all the men, for sure. And they've all had their little affair with Marilyn, or they all have that in their mind, that little love affair with Marilyn. Yeah. But that's where it started. And he said, I have this one-woman play that I wrote many years ago. Would you like to read it? And I said, why? Because I have a line of men falling at their, on their knees, sliding on their knees. They're dancers. And I have a band. I'm having a blast doing my show in casinos. Well, why would I do anything but this? And he said, well, you're going to have to transition out of this at some point. And I want you to read this as your next possible project. And so I did and said, no way. That's way too much work. And it's a drama. I'm a comic actress. I like comedy. I like song and dance. That's what I do. And well, he begged and begged and begged and begged me to do this part. And I just finally just gave in and just read him a scene.
Like, shut the hell up. Let's do it.
No, it was like that. I was like, all right, already. So I read him a scene. He goes, it's brilliant, and I'm getting you a director tomorrow. I went, okay, that's either good or bad. I'm not really sure. But I never agreed to take it on completely until I learned the whole play in many, many versions, because a new work always has many rewrites. So I learned many, many, and we had a Shakespearean director, which I thought Marilyn would love for her play. And she was brilliant, too. Very brilliant woman. Stephanie Schein. She's now in Nashville. She was in Seattle at that time, and she was artistic director of the Seattle Shakespeare Company. And we worked together for 18 months, just 8 hours a day in rehearsals. And it was just a master's in acting. I mean, truly. So anyway, we did that, and then Jimmy James was part of the process, at the end part of the process, because I'd done the acting work, and then I needed someone to come in and help me with the physicality. And Jimmy James, if you look him up online on YouTube, is still the best there is, the best there ever was at Marilyn. He's a guy, but he dresses in drag, he sings live, he performs live. He doesn't do Marilyn anymore. He does her, but not in full drag. But he's gorgeous, dead on. The makeup is just like art. It's fantastic. So Greg introduced me to him. We had lunch with him in New York, and he agreed to come out and help me for a week. And so we went through the whole, he helped me with some of the scenes and just kind of the way she thought, because he had spent so much time with her that he really had I swore now, like if he's not in drag, he's kind of an overweight, short guy, and even now, if you did Marilyn sitting here, you'd swear she was in his body,
it's
coming
that good.
out. Oh, yeah, very much so, very convincing. And so he spent a week with me, thankfully, and walking and talking, and I flunked walking for that whole week. But he spent 8 hours on my makeup the very first time. He did the makeup design for the play then, and he coached me in a photo shoot that was really, really fooled all the fans. Nobody knew it. Those pictures still come up online, and they try to sell them as Marilyn. It's quite convincing.
Is that good?
Yeah. And granted, the photographer was brilliant as well, but it was a great experience. And then we took it to Hollywood, and I was terrified. It was just the most terrifying part of my life ever to that point, and opening it on Hollywood. I mean, whose idea is that? The guy sitting next to me right now, my husband.
That's his job. He's the producer, right?
Yeah, so another brilliant idea. And he goes, well, if you get good reviews, we'll know we have something. If we don't get good reviews, we'll go home and have a happy life. Don't worry about it. And I'm like, oh, how can I not worry about it? But long story long, we ended up touring it for 10 years around the world, and it got great reviews everywhere it went. So we went to London. We went just everywhere. So it was great. Great experience.
I'm thinking maybe I saw it in London. Going back.
It's possible.
Yeah.
On the West End. Mm-hmm.
Yep, in the West End.
Yep.
Now, Mae West was one of the first actresses to sort of publicly be sexy on film.
Yes.
In a more overt way. It wasn't nuanced hardly at all.
Well, she had a play called Sex, a Broadway play, and it closed after the first act, and she ended up in jail for a week. And she was an overnight sensation. But she was a trailblazer, that one, and she'd get censored all the time.
All the time.
Yeah. And so much so that you'd see her movies, and it was always the same lines, because those are the only ones they didn't cut out. That's the only one she could get by the censors.
So what was different about Marilyn from the Mae West style? I mean, there were lots of actresses in the 40s and 50s who were very attractive or a little sexy, but what made Marilyn so different?
I think she's unapologetically the persona she created. I mean, she just took it full bore. Jane Harlow was an inspiration for her. Mm-hmm. Mae West was also an inspiration for her. She wanted to be, a great actress, but everybody gravitated to this. She could see where the hot buttons of the public were, and I think she just pushed them a lot. And she didn't like it that much when it became so successful, I believe. And it probably was part of her demise, really, because she wanted to spin off beyond that, and she just couldn't quite kick that role. Everybody didn't want her for who she really was. She was constantly playing that part after a while. And that's
the whole premise of the song Candle in the Wind. Is about that.
Right. And they just didn't want her. I mean, and she didn't have any family to speak of. I mean, she had a half-sister, but they weren't very close. And maybe Joe Dimaggio she was as close to as anybody, but she didn't have that person to go to at the end of a hard day. Like, I have a family. I have a happy childhood. I had a happy childhood. I can walk into my mom and dad's house on my worst day without a stitch of makeup on, looking like a homeless person, and they would still accept me for me.
Sure.
She didn't have that.
Sure.
And that is amazing considering all she achieved in her life. Tremendously. Just no support of any kind.
Did her marriages to Arthur Miller and Joe Dimaggio, I never quite knew, how did they end? Who broke up with whom in those marriages?
Well, I think that she didn't want to be a housewife, and he just really had a problem with that.
That was Arthur Miller?
Well, that was partly part of the problem there as well. I mean, I think they're complicated relationships, and who really knows what happens inside, behind closed doors. But he dried up as a writer when he was with her. So, and he was always trying to write, but I think that she wasn't intellectual enough for him, and she wasn't cerebral enough to satisfy that part of his being. And it was frustrating for her and frustrating for him.
Well, my research team found out that during that time she was married to Arthur Miller, they had met up with Frank Lloyd Wright at some point.
Oh, okay.
And had commissioned a house for Marilyn Monroe in Maui.
Oh, is that right?
Which never got built, but the design of it was eventually incorporated in the King Kamehameha Golf Club in Maui. And if you go there, you can see some photos on the wall in the club of Marilyn Monroe working out, lifting weights, because some of the design elements from the King Kamehameha Club were going to be in the house for Arthur Miller. and Marilyn Monroe.
Oh, cool.
Little trivia I thought I'd share with you.
Yes, I haven't heard that one
Yeah.
yet. Yeah. I love all this little trivia. I love meeting people that spend time with her, or little fun facts are always fascinating for me.
Now, I assume one of these people that you've met who has fun facts and trivia is Greg Schreiner?
Oh, I love Greg. Yeah. He was a big fan of the play, actually.
Yeah.
He endorsed it first off in Hollywood when it was in a little black box. He came and he told Greg this. You want to talk? He tells this story better than I do.
Well, yeah, this was our very first performance in Hollywood, and we were very, very nervous about the play. I mean, it was the first time anybody had seen it, and we had all these fans, Marilyn Monroe fans, had come to see it, and this guy came in with this blonde hair and a scarf wrapped around his neck, and he came up and says, "I'm Greg Schreiner. I'm the president of the International Fan Club." And I said, "Wow, we're really glad to have you here. Thanks for coming." And he says, I said, "I hope you enjoy the play." And he goes, "Well, frankly, I've never enjoyed anything about Marilyn Monroe that wasn't with Marilyn Monroe in it."
Right.
And I went, "Oh, well, thanks for coming."
Yeah.
And I thought, oh my God, he's just going to kill us, And he went in and he watched the play, and he came out and he really enjoyed it, and he had a great time, and he just couldn't do enough to help us. And he invited Sunny over to his home to see his collection of dresses. And Sunny, you can tell him about what happened over at his house. That was crazy over there.
Yeah, and he invited me. Well, all the dresses, he has a ton of dresses.
He has the largest collection in the world, I believe, of Marilyn paraphernalia.
I would believe that's true, and I have been there. I'm sure he's got more since I saw it then. But he invited me over, showed me everything. I got to sit in the chair from Bus Stop, her movie chair, and see. It was great to see the Some Like It Hot script, her original script, and she'd written in the the margins with lipstick. You know what I mean? Because maybe she didn't have a pen or something.
Right.
And it was. Maybe it was a red pen, but it looked like lipstick, and it was really, really fascinating to see those types of things firsthand and see her take on everything. And then he had her dresses, and they were on his dining room table, and they were, he has lots of stars dresses. He has, Marlene Dietrich, he has, you name them, he has everybody. And they're all on a big, in this room, his wardrobe room, on a wall, just hung up, not in bags, nothing, just hung up, smashed together. Marilyn's dresses are on this table, his dining room table, and they were Tiffany blue boxes with acetone-free paper, and it was all wrapped perfectly. Mm-hmm. And then he had some of them open, and it was very cool because I saw inside and on the labels, many times she had worn another star's dress because they just took it out of wardrobe, the studio.
Right.
And that was, for me, fascinating. I thought all of her costumes were created just for her, and it wasn't the case, Obviously, many of them were, and the most famous ones were. But then he said, would you like to try one on? And I said, oh, my heavens, because I didn't dare touch them because, the fabric is old, it's going to disintegrate. And I said, well, yeah. So I tried on the silver lame dress that I think she accepted the Golden Globe Award in. And I came out after I tried it on. He said, would you like a pair of shoes to match? A pair of silver pumps? I go, well, I just have some mules on. That'll probably be fine. So knock, knock, knock on the door. And he comes with the silver pumps, and I put the silver pumps on.
Must be magical for you.
Yeah. Oh, it was. And thank God it fit. That was the big thing for me. I was like, oh, what if this doesn't fit? So I came out of the door, and he was on the phone. He goes, wait a minute, she's in the dress. I got to go. And so we took some pictures and whatnot. And I didn't do my hair and makeup as Marilyn that day, which I really regret because I would have loved to have done the whole drag, in that dress. But it is what it is. So then he had the little white stole to go with it that, that she had worn. And that was really exciting. So I went and changed into my stuff, and I came back out, and he's on the phone again. And he looks up at me and goes, oh, you're you again.
Well, now, I assume that at some point, you and the big Marilyn, the big statue of Marilyn have been in the same place. Now, that was a fixture here in Palm Springs for a long time, and I hear it's coming back, right?
Our play was here when the statue was here. And,
okay.
And so I've had my picture taken.
I'm sure.
with the statue. But I'm very excited that she's coming back. She should be here. She brought Palm Springs back to life.
She certainly did.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you know if she had any association with any of the houses here or any of the celebrities? Like, did she hang out at the Frank Sinatra house a lot during that era? Or?
Yes, definitely. She hung out at the Frank Sinatra, and she also hung out at the Racket Club quite a lot.
Okay.
Charlie Farrell's Racket Club.
Yeah.
Which is just a couple blocks from here. Was just a couple blocks. It burned down in the 70s. But it was famous for its Hollywood parties and all the movie stars and coming in and agents. And she was discovered in the pool, actually, by a famous Hollywood agent, Johnny Hyde.
In Palm Springs, she was discovered in the pool?
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Yes. I was at the pool. I was swimming in it. We had some drinks. We talked. His name was John, but everyone called him Johnny because he was so friendly.
Well, you certainly nailed the voice. Now, what do you think brought Marilyn here to Palm Springs to be found?
I think it was a Hollywood party.
Just a party?
Yeah, it was a party, and they had all the Hollywood starlets that would come. They'd invite the Hollywood starlets, and all the moguls would come, and the producers and directors and agents, and sure. It's a mingle.
A mingle.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know, did Marilyn ever have her own house here in Palm Springs?
Not that I'm aware. Not that I've heard that some people say she had one in Vista Las Palmas.
Uh-huh.
And, I know where it is, that at the end of Via Monte Vista, there's a home. But the fans say no. So I believe the fans, because the fans know.
They do the research,
everything
right?
about her. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they say no.
Okay, well, that's good to know. We don't have to chase that urban myth down.
But there's still the scenery buses or, the scenic tours going by that house. And I know what they're saying. But I don't know. The fans say no. But.
Now, where are you going to be appearing this summer that people might be able to see you perform?
We have a little island cabin on Vashon Island, and I'll do a fundraiser.
I know Vashon, yeah.
I'll probably do a fundraiser there this summer.
Is that the one with the monastery on it?
Yeah, it does have a monastery. Mm-hmm. It does indeed.
I've been to that monastery.
Oh, be darned.
Bought some coffee from there. They make great coffee, or at least they used to.
Oh, gosh. I see the gates open. I walk by there on my daily walk when we're there in the summer, but I've never gone in. So I will now.
Yeah.
We're working on, actually, Sunny isn't doing as much performing as she did in the past. I mean, we used to be on the road, like 12 months out of the year. It was crazy. And so now that we've kind of cut back a little bit of that, she does her special shows and stuff. But we're working on a new television pilot for a thing called Sunny's Top 10, which would be where she's in a city and she talks about the top 10 things that she likes to do in that city, cities that she's performed in and that she has a history with. We're talking about trying to shoot the pilot here in Palm Springs, and hopefully
great
we'll do
place
that
to shoot it.
Yeah, we think it'd be fun to do. So that's kind of what we're looking to do, our next project. But then we also have a large production show that we do every Christmas that runs for 30 performances every year at Christmas time up in Seattle and Bellevue, which is a very high-end area in Seattle.
Oh, sure.
We had our film here last year, our documentary film here at the American Documentary Film Festival, which is here in Palm Springs. And so
that was Becoming Marilyn?
That was Becoming Marilyn Monroe, right, which was a story of the whole process. And so that did very well for us.
Well, if the top 10 thing doesn't work out, I can see you in character as Marilyn talking about mid-century modern houses all around Palm Springs and showing the really nice ones and giving insight in only the way Marilyn can.
Well, she would have a special insight. There's no question. She had a way of seeing things. Yes.
Well, Sunny and Greg, thank you so much for joining and talking with me today.
Yes, no, my pleasure. You know what place I've had fun walking by, though, is Dinah Shore's home.
Right, which is now Leonardo DiCaprio's home.
Yes, the Donald Wexler home. Mm-hmm. Yes, I love walking by there because she's one of my new impressions. So I've been spending some time with her, and I know she spent lots of time with Bob Hope and Bing Crosby, but Frank Sinatra,
right?
Particularly.
And are you doing her pre or post the Burt Reynolds years?
It's a little about the Burt Reynolds years, I guess. A little bit before, maybe. But we talk about her golf tournament here. And then I do a duet with Frank Sinatra. He's on screen, and she would have been, but we blocked her out. Sorry, Dinah.
Yeah.
But I'll hopefully do her proud. And so that's kind of a fun element to the show.
And that house that she owned backs up to the Kirk Douglas estate.
Oh, okay. That's who that is. I was telling Greg that today. We drove by there today because I was showing him Dinah's house today. And I said, I know it's somebody's. I can't remember whose house that is. I got to get a printout of all
Who
the
just
houses.
passed away here recently. At 103, I think.
103. Yeah. I was at the Frank Sinatra Celebrity Golf Tournament, and he was Barbara Sinatra's special guest.
Okay.
One year.
Yeah.
And she always had a special host, and he was that one year. And the year prior to that, I actually won the tournament. I performed at the tournament for years.
But you won it playing
3-4
golf?
years. I did.
Oh, cool.
Right. It was. I'm not.
Okay, a series of Marilyn golf lessons would be fantastic.
Yeah, well, she played.
Watch Marilyn putt.
Yeah, she did it in high heels. Just saying. Just saying.
Well, thank you both very much.
Our pleasure. Thank you for having us, George.
That was the completely charming Sunny Thompson talking about her life portraying Marilyn Monroe.
And now a moment of reflection from Nietzsche.
Durability, designed to last for years to come, bringing you peace and tranquility. You feel relaxed, knowing your house can easily achieve any exterior look and any color. Wood, concrete. Your house loves feeling this good, and you love feeling this good. Nietzsche, Nietzsche. Nietzsche, Nietzsche. Say it with me. Nietzsche. Advanced engineering. Nietzsche, Nietzsche. Durability, textures, finishes, and colors. Visit Nietzsche.com/US Modernist. Nietzsche, Nietzsche. Nietzsche. That's N. C H I H. Wait for it. A look you'll love. Nietzsche.
Coming up, Greg Schreiner never met Marilyn Monroe, but he knows more about her than almost anyone. We joined George and Greg poolside at the U.S. Modernist compound in Palm Springs.
Greg, every year, I believe it's on the evening of August 4th, you start planning something. What is that?
It's a very special day, in fact. August 4th is actually the night that Marilyn died in 1962. So we, every year, do a memorial service for her on August the 5th at the cemetery where she's buried. So it involves a lot of planning. We start much earlier than August 4th, but obviously that's the last chance before the event actually happens.
Where is this and what's involved?
Well, the service takes place at the cemetery, which is Westwood Memorial Park Cemetery in Westwood, California. And that's where she is buried along with a couple of her relatives, which is, I think, why they chose to put her there. And there's a lot of celebrities there, actually, buried at the cemetery. And we do a service every year for her, and we invite people that knew her to come and speak and to talk about her. And we find that now, over the years, it's become sort of a thing that people just know about, and they come. We don't advertise, but people just know it's going to be there, and they come from all over the world.
How long have you been doing it?
We started in 1982, and I like to say when I was 5 years old, but unfortunately I'm a little older than that. But it was one of the first things I did. I'd moved to California to go to school at UCLA, and I decided I wanted to do something for Marilyn because she'd been a big person in my life, and so I formed the fan club, and then our first thing that we wanted to do was to have a memorial service for her, which we did in 82.
And the fan club has grown and grown since then.
It has tremendously, particularly with the internet. That's really helped a lot. We were more limited originally just to local people, but as the internet came around, we now have many thousands of members from all over the world, and many of them do journey to Los Angeles for the service or for some of our other events.
you're doing also, I think, some tours, right? Where you go to places.
We have done tours, particularly in big years where we expect a lot of people to come for the memorial service. We'll have tours of places she frequented and things like that that sort of supplement while they're here.
How did you fall into this? Were you a fan more closer to that time, or did you just find it sort of later in life that this exploded into your DNA?
Well, I think I fell in love with her at an early age. I was a little boy when she died, but I remember vividly seeing her on the screen in Some Like It Hot. And I just couldn't believe how beautiful she was. I'd never seen anything like that where I lived in Illinois, the small rural community. Nobody looked like Marilyn Monroe. So I just thought, this is a very special lady. And then the more I studied her, the more that I collected of her, the more I fell in love with her, to the point where she's been a really big part of my life.
And how did that manifest itself from there? Because you've gotten pretty serious about this, Greg. I mean, you're not just a casual fan.
That is true. Well, I've been president of her fan club since 1982, and I've collected a tremendous amount of stuff that was hers, including gowns and furniture and paper things. And I have a library of over 300 books on Marilyn Monroe. So I've become kind of a national resource for Marilyn. And when people are doing documentaries and things of that nature, they come to me and ask my advice. And I'm still being filmed for documentaries all the time.
Sunny Thompson told me that she went over to your house one time and you said, "Here, try this on." And it was one of Marilyn's dresses.
Huh? That is correct. And that was a very rare occasion, because I rarely ever let anybody try anything on. But she was so lovely, and she was so much like Marilyn. I said, this is one time when I got to make an exception and let her do it. And she looked absolutely radiant in it, and her body was exactly the same size as Marilyn. So it was almost like it was meant to be.
You have an extensive collection of dresses and gowns from a variety of people. Tell us about that.
Yes, well, what happened originally was I started collecting Marilyn, but as Marilyn became more and more expensive to own, I decided I would maybe branch out and start collecting other stars. So I started in that direction, and now I have over 500 gowns of all the famous stars of Hollywood, which is why I'm here in Palm Springs now, because I'll be doing a show honoring those stars with my collection called Hollywood Revisited.
So how does this show work? Do you have people in the gowns, or do the gowns kind of magically float across the stage on how does a gown show work?
No, it's actually a live show. I have singers and dancers, men and women, because I have male costumes as well. And they wear the original clothes, and behind them I'm projecting the scene from the film at the same time, so people can make that connection of the costume to the star. And then they sing and dance songs relevant to the costume at the same time. It's a very, very fun show.
It sounds like it's a complex production.
It's very complex, but it's really fun, and people leave with a smile on their face, because I think we're longing to return a bit to that golden age of Hollywood, because it's gone. We'll never have that era again, and we like to really think that we're contributing to people being happy again, and sort of reminiscing about that lost era.
It was a time where celebrity was a fairly small number of people.
Absolutely, and very tightly controlled by the studios. So you never heard anything bad about any stars. That was covered up. That was only they were glamorous, and they were almost not like they were part of humankind. They were almost like a little more than that.
Like demigods.
Demigods, because they were so incredibly beautiful, and you didn't relate to them as people like you do today with stars.
But you also see now that everybody's a star. I mean, we're all publishers on our phones. We're all TV producers with our little videos, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. And back then, none of that existed. So the way you found out is through film and through eventually television and magazines.
Magazines, yeah.
So they were always projected as incredibly beautiful. Every shot was so controlled, and people just didn't think of them as normal people. And in a sense, they weren't normal. Their lives were very controlled that way.
And here we are in Palm Springs, which at the time, under the studio system, was the furthest away that the celebrities could go as part of their contracts.
Absolutely. And the Racket Club was one of the big places they came to. It was a really well-known for a lot of celebrities wanting to go there.
Did any of the celebrities that you follow or track get into mid-century modern that you know of?
Well, I think there were some that were obviously living that era, so they were maybe buying homes of that architecture and that style. I don't know personally anybody that went out of their way to collect that style or to be interested in that style, but certainly if they were living it, a lot of them wanted to have the latest and most modern thing, and that would come around in that direction.
I was talking with Sunny Thompson about Marilyn's marriage to Arthur Miller, where I understood that Frank Lloyd Wright designed a house for her and Arthur in Maui.
Yes.
Which never got built.
Right.
But is elements of which have been incorporated into the King Kamehameha Club.
Yes, and I was actually in Maui, and I went to it. It's similar, actually. It's not quite the same because it isn't a house. It was made into something different, but at least it got utilized a bit. It looked like quite a spectacular design, but I think maybe it was actually more than they wanted and more expensive than they wanted.
Marilyn was connected to men who were at the top of their game.
Wasn't she?
At the time. Yes. In very different fields.
Yeah, Joe Dimaggio and Arthur Miller, both top playwright and top sports person at the time. She attracted those kind of people. They were as equally fascinated as I was with her. In fact, almost everybody found her that way. She was also known for Carl Sandburg, the famous poet, was a big fan of hers. And Dame Edith Sitwell was another big fan. Lots of important people were very attracted to Marilyn.
John Kennedy?
Yes.
Yeah, well, we can mention that one too.
Right? And it was just incredible how she was such a focus at that time.
Mm-hmm. Well, she had something very special going on. There was a magical quality about her that if you watch her on the screen or in photos, you can't take your eyes off of her. And that I don't know if that's something you're just born with, maybe, because she definitely had it in spades. And I can't think of any other star that quite has captured that as she did. And the fact that today, no matter what star you talk about, she's number one. I think almost everybody in the world knows Marilyn Monroe.
And she passed in 1962 before she got old.
That's true. So she's frozen in our minds.
Yeah, she's frozen in time
as that beautiful, voluptuous, glamorous, funny woman. And she'll remain that way forever. And maybe that was part of her mystique, too, is that she did die at a time when she was at the peak of her beauty.
Now, I've always heard this as an urban myth, but I'm sure you will know the answer. Is it true that Joe Dimaggio sent flowers every so often, but very frequently, to her gravesite?
Yes, actually, for 20 years, he had a Parisian florist in Los Angeles send every week flowers to her grave. He eventually did stop after 20 years. I think...
He was Mr. Coffee by then.
Yeah, he definitely was Mr. Coffee by then, yeah.
Jolton Joe.
Another side of his career.
He moved on from baseball.
Yeah.
But I remember reading that in so many places about...
Well, he dearly loved Marilyn. That was a real love affair. They probably were not suited as husband and wife because his idea of a wife was more a housewife to be around, more of a chauvinistic attitude. And she really needed a career. She really needed to have that in her life, and it didn't quite mix.
But that's 1,000 floral orders, even if he just did it for 20 years.
That's true. Though he was rich, I don't think that was going to break his bank at all.
That says a lot, though.
Well,
he sold a lot of coffee, Tom. I mean, come on now.
Yeah.
But he loved her, and I think he was the one that really organized her funeral. He stepped in and took over because no one else was really there to do it, and he was there for her at the very end.
Was there someone that Marilyn really longed for that she missed out on?
I'm not aware of anyone.
Because you always hear it the other way.
Right.
People longing for Marilyn. But I was wondering if there was someone that was just her soulmate that she couldn't get to.
I'm not aware of anyone that she ever found that would...
Well, she never met you.
That's
right.
true.
Yeah, but
George,
I was the wrong age.
You would have been the one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I needed about a 25-year head
start.
start.
You needed a damn time machine.
Yeah. I'll work on that, Tom. Thank you.
Yeah.
But clearly, you've fallen under the spell. I think she would like you very much if she had met you.
I would like to think that. If I'd ever had a chance to meet her, I would like to think she would have found me someone that she could rely on and someone that she could call a friend, because I would very much like to be thought of that way. In a sense, I think it's happened in a way because I feel her presence in my house, maybe because I'm surrounded by so many things that she owned in my home, that she's kind of guiding me a little bit. I mean, things have happened to me. I've gotten items that I can't imagine why I would have gotten them, and I did. They came to me almost out of nowhere.
So do you believe that her spirit follows you or inhabits you?
I do not inhabits me, but I do feel
It's
that
not a possession, Tom.
no.
Yeah, okay.
But there's
Right.
a presence there. And Susan Strasberg, who was a good friend of hers, the daughter of Lee Strasberg, said that she feels that Marilyn's spirit was so unique that when she died, it's been spinning outward, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger to where it's encompassed kind of the entire world now. And it's true. You go anywhere in the world and you see images of Marilyn. It's a unique kind of situation. I just can't explain otherwise how so many things have happened to me, and I've acquired things that would be almost impossible to get, and yet somehow they've come my way.
I talked with Joshua Greene, whose father, Milton.
He's a dear man and a good
Milton
friend.
Greene.
Yeah.
The Greenes befriended Marilyn, and she lived with them for a time.
And she even babysat Joshua when he was a little.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we were talking about what some of the most iconic photos were. And I just wondered, in your opinion, I know that there's the great photo with the skirt blowing up from the movie, but what are some of the other images that people have really locked into over time?
Well, almost any photo of Marilyn, I think, is wonderfully iconic. There's, aside from the subway one, there's a couple that she really loved. One was taken by Cecil Beaton, the famous, I guess, photographer, among other things. And he took what turned out to look like a high school graduation picture. She's laying back, and there's a rose across her chest. And she loved that one. She also loved one where she was photographed by Frank Powalny at 20th Century Fox, and she's wearing a red dress, sort of a purple sash across it. And that one you see her signing a lot. She had a lot of 8x10s made up, and she signed that one. So that was another big favorite. She loved photography, obviously, and that was one of her, much more actually than being an actress, I think. She liked the photography the best. And there were certain photographers, like you mentioned, Milton Greene was a really big part of her life, and there were several others, too, that really photographed her incredibly well.
Do you think she had a favorite movie of hers?
It's funny you should say that. A movie she really loved that hardly anybody knows is Don't Bother to Knock, which was really her first big role. And she plays a mentally deranged woman in it. And it starred Anne Bancroft as well. And it was really a good movie, but people don't know it. But
Maybe
felt,
because it meant so much to her.
It meant a lot to
entree.
her that it was one of her first, and she felt she was really good in that role.
Yeah.
She really, and she is really good in that role. But I'm prejudiced. I think every movie she made was fabulous. So
Okay.
Now, Greg, something that you and I share is that, like it or not, we've both become archivists of different things.
Yes.
And so I was wondering, what's your succession plan? Who's going to take over and run this bad boy when you're not around?
Where am I going?
Now, you're going to join Marilyn, I assume, at some point.
You know, I have not thought that far ahead yet. I'm working right now in conjunction with the Motion Picture Academy. They're opening a new museum, which will be opening in December of this year. And it's going to be incredibly spectacular. It's huge. It's monster size. And we're working on an exhibit honoring Marilyn, along with some of my other costumes, which we're going to other exhibits. And it's possible that might be the final place for that to go if I feel that's appropriate. I don't know yet. We'll see how it turns out.
You have some time to think about it.
I hopefully have a little time left. Yeah.
Because in talking with lots and lots of collectors and families and things like that, it's the issue that nobody really wants to work on because, you know, it brings up a lot of emotions and things like that. But the tragedy is when there isn't a plan and this stuff ends up in a used store at warehouse in Skokie, Illinois, you know, just because of fate. And then it takes a whole Navy SEAL rescue team to go get it back again. So,
and this has happened to other collectors.
Yeah.
And some collectors have, before they died, have decided to sell their collections at an auction. Debbie Reynolds did that, for instance. She had several thousand costumes, and so she said, let's have a lot of fun. And she was there at the auction every day, enjoying the pleasure of seeing them go to other people. And, of course, she made a lot of money out of it, too.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
So I assume you have gowns and dresses of some current day actresses and
a few current things. I tend to like the old stuff better just because
that's
I think
your focus.
It's better made and it's more where I'm coming from. I try to collect a few more contemporary things just because younger people in the audience might relate to that a little bit more. But generally, most of it's 50s and 40s costumes.
Okay. And where can people learn more about you and reach you?
Well, I have a couple websites.
Okay.
If they want to know more about my Hollywood Revisited show, they simply go to HollywoodRevisited.com. It's very easy.
Easy.
And if they want to learn more about my collection of Marilyn Monroe items, they can go to themarilynmonroesite.com.
TheMarilynMonroeSite.com.
And that's SITE.
Right.
And that will take them to my collection, and you can see all that. And if they want to join the club, they can go to MarilynRemember.org, and that will take them to that. And it's no charge. It's free, and they'll learn about all our events and things we're doing. And so those are 3 different websites that could be of value to somebody out in your radio audience.
And I know if I want to find you, I just need to go somewhere specific on August 5th.
Yes, you'll always find me definitely at the cemetery. And if you're in Los Angeles, look me up.
Okay.
I love sharing my collection with people. I get people from all the world ringing me up. Can I come by and look? I say, sure.
Well, thanks, Brad. We really enjoyed talking with you.
Well, likewise. Thank you for having me. Oh, my pleasure.
That was my guest, Greg Schreiner, remembering Marilyn Monroe.
Now, not many boys can say that Marilyn Monroe was their babysitter, but Joshua Green can. His father was one of the photographers that chronicled a superstar in the early 1960s. Let's now go to George and Joshua at Mod Week.
So I want to start with something I thought was kind of fascinating because I've heard about this for years in relation to this country, and I've seen a few photos, but you seem to be the expert in this, and that is cars in Cuba. So tell me about that project.
Well, I should start by saying that I'm half Cuban.
Okay.
My mother's side of the family is Cuban, and I visited Cuba before the Castro days, and in 57, I was born in 54, so I was three and a half. We went to Cuba for a brief period of time, and I remember it. And so in 1993, and a good portion of my family have died there. Some of my family left there. Castro moved into my family's home, which was a lovely Ponderosa house with a garden in the middle and the rooms all around, like a patio style, which was very different for that type of place. They had a little ranch outside of Havana, which I remember as a kid. Anyway, so in 1993, a friend of mine, Dee Dee Allen, who's the daughter of Joe Allen, who owns the restaurant in New York, a very famous restaurant.
Oh, sure.
This is her daughter, who's an architectural student and a wonderful writer. She contacted me and said, I have this crazy idea. I want to go to Cuba and photograph all the old American cars. I said, I'm in. And a friend of mine, Sophie, who's here with me right now, we went together in 1993. So we flew down. Now, this is when Cuba was not available to the United States.
Right.
So it is...
Do you have to route through Mexico or something?
Canada.
Canada.
But it's all make-believe.
Okay.
It's a charter flight that originates in Canada and stops in Miami at the charter terminal.
Okay.
They bus us in to the charter terminal from the main terminal where you were told to meet them. And we walk down this charter, and there's literally a white piece of paper on the wall with masking tape that says Havana. And we get on this plane from Miami and flew to Havana.
Nice.
Yeah. And
but you're on a, quote, Canadian charter.
We were not only on a Canadian charter, we were booked as 150 people that were, no, not even that many. It was about 75 of us. We were booked as doing a 10-day seminar and teaching the Cubans the value of bicycles.
Wow, this is like a CIA tale, really. This is the undercover operation.
Yeah, and so we checked into the most ugly Russian cement tower that's 12 stories high. And when I say cement, it is cement on the outside, it is cement on the inside, it is cement in the hallways. You walk into the rooms, they are cement walls, and the platform that the mattress on was cement. The end tables were cement. It was a glorified jail cell built out of cement. However, the windows did open, and they had these little cement patios that you could walk out and see the ocean because it was on an ocean view type of setting. Anyway, the idea was that we would check in, have breakfast the next morning, and leave. And for the next 10 days, we were on our own. We had private contacts and other things, and we never went back.
And you were photographing these cars.
And so the hard part was getting gasoline. Without the gasoline, the cars don't move. So Dee Dee was able to find through some of her contacts, other writers and press people, reporters, gave her contacts to people that had access to gasoline and knew their way around the country.
So you're taking photos down there, and you're finding ways to creatively get fuel for the autos.
And what you do, like in any photography that I do on location, is you go find the location where you want to do the photograph. Mm-hmm. So in the case of cars, I'm spending time driving around looking for locations. We find where the car is that we're going to put fuel in. Then I try to find a location that's fairly close by. We did this numerous times throughout the state. Part of the time we were in the Havana area, part of the time we in Varadero Beach, part of the time we went to Santiago de Cuba. I mean, we drove through the countryside 4 or 5 hours out of Havana. You know, we got leads on certain cars that are in certain places and went looking and knocking on doors. And sometimes we didn't know the people. We just drive by a house and see a car in a driveway. And it wasn't so much about gifting money. It was about gifting underwear and makeup and sewing materials and soap.
Things that weren't available.
Things that are not available to the people that live there. It's sad, but you go into a Cuban market and you're lucky if you can get a bag of rice that lasts you a month and a chicken, 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Yet with it's called the Diplomatico. It's basically a supermarket that you need an international passport to get in. You walk in there, it's like Safeway.
Okay.
Every product in the world is available to you, every item. So I would, because I still had family there, I'd go and spend like $200-300 and buy all kinds of foods and bring them to my family members. But because the electricity is turned off for 4 hours a day,
right,
where they live, they have to share the food by putting it in all of their freezers.
Yes.
And literally, I was feeding a street.
Oh, wow.
And there were wonderful meals because of that, but at the end of the day, it was sort of sad to realize that that's how these people were living in 1993. Anyway, we had a wonderful time. I got to go back to Cuba and do this project, which was a modest project, but I'm very proud of it, and it was the real deal.
Photography is not something you've taken up fairly recently. This runs in your family, and you're here talking about Milton Greene, a very celebrated photographer who was noted for also working with celebrities.
Yeah, and what people don't really know, because so many people relate him to the Marilyn Project with the 4 years, but the truth is he was a celebrated photographer, did beautiful fashion work in his earlier career. Then there was the Marilyn period in the middle of his career, and then there was the continuation of Life magazine and the work they did with Green Eula, Joe Eula, beautiful fashion work, very 60s. And then it culminated with McCall and the Boys, the wonderful Paris special that was done about these young designers in Paris, Yves Saint Laurent, Pierre Cardin, Marc Bohan, and Emmanuel Ungaro.
Okay.
That was a 1-hour special in 1969. And then Milton and Joe split up because Joe went his way. He had a very successful career in fashion as a fashion illustrator and hooked up with Halston, Design Studio 54, Liza with a Z, The Supremes. I mean, Joe was a great artist and a dear friend of Milton's starting back in the 40s when they first met. Anyway, so Milton then went on continuing his career on his own and did great stuff through the 70s, started getting ill in the early 80s, and died at 63 in 1985.
Wow.
So his path was a meteor shower from 1948 to 1958, and then another rise from 58 to 68, and then a sort of leveling out from 76 to 85.
So what are some of the books that have been written about your dad? And you've done one yourself, right?
I've done 3.
3, okay.
Yeah. But the first book that included Milton, which is a collaboration with the photographers, it's called Marilyn by Mailer, Norman Mailer, in 1976.
Okay.
And then there was a book that Milton did, which was his first sort of retrospective on his life's work called Of Women and Their Elegance.
All right.
Which was also written by Norman because of the friendship they developed. Very few copies available, very hard to get, wonderful book, beautiful pictures. And the sad part of the story is Milton's entire body of work, which was not a lot for a photographer who worked that many years, was only 300,000 images. Mm-hmm. Close to 125,000 of those images were no longer reproducible even while he was alive in the mid-'70s.
Why not?
Because the film was unstable and it literally disintegrated. It faded away. And you could not reproduce it without doing very heavy airbrushing.
This was pre-Kodachrome technology?
Well, Kodachrome, you didn't use Kodachrome. Photographers of that day usually used Ektachrome.
Okay.
You could have it processed in 2 hours. Kodachrome, you got to send a Kodak to Rochester. You got to wait a day and a half or 2 days or 3 days to get it back. Most commercial photographers were using Ektachrome.
All right.
Ektachrome E4, which was the film used in the 40s and 50s, was extremely unstable, even though Kodak swore it wasn't. And also how you store the film, which no photographers really knew about what we know now. It should be in a cool, dry place and maintain a constant temperature all the time.
Not in somebody's hot attic.
Right. Or up
which happens a lot.
Right. Let's get those boxes out of here. I need the room. So photographers would put it up in the attic or in the studio in a loft or near where the heat is completely different. So Milton's film, he died believing that most of his best work was gone for good. And so flash forward, it was until 89, 90, I started getting involved with people that were teaching me the early days of digital. And I said, wait a minute, this is the future. All photography is finite. Even black and white film is finite.
Sure.
Let me get involved in photo restoration and start saving great art. That was my dream. And I started a company with the initial impulse starting because of the experience I had with Milton, but I got to work with the Wright Brothers collection from the Library of Congress, original glass plates. I got to work with other archives of other museums that they have. And I got to be a curator and see amazing work. And so for me, it gave me another life after being a photographer.
Yeah.
So I went on and started this business. Now it's 30 years I've done this.
So you're an archivist as
I'm
well?
an archivist. Yeah.
That's great. Welcome to the club. I've
Thank you.
become an archivist too. Accidentally, but I still became one.
Well, I fell into it backwards as well. And through the experience of being a printer and being a photographer, the digital world embraced me and took me in, so I was able to work with Epson and HP and Canon and all the great printing companies and the paper companies that make the media, which is really the combo. That's the key.
Right.
And we've been able to become a fine art printing site. So I have 40 and 60-inch printers, and I'm able to print for photographers and print for Milton's work as well. And we do exhibitions and installations all over the world.
Have you found a process other than, photoshopping to take some of your dad's most obscure, degenerated images and somehow magically pull them back to life?
Photoshop is the way.
Okay.
I mean, there are other programs
Okay.
on one, and there are different
I
programs.
didn't know
that
if
do-
there's like an artificial intelligence kind of model that goes in micropixel by micropixel and makes those decisions.
The hardest thing about doing restoration is twofold. One, before there were automated algorithms,
Yeah.
which basically these software companies learned from looking at what people like us were doing the hard way. Mm-hmm. Then they figured out shortcuts, and they work pretty good. But the goal that they're getting to is trying to look like today's photography.
Right.
So when you have a photograph that was done in the 40s, 50s, or 60s with a particular piece of equipment, i.e. the camera and the lens, there's certain qualities that those pieces of equipment had a signature look.
Right.
So you can't take something from the 40s and make it look like it was shot yesterday at Laguna Beach at the Extreme Sports Expo.
Right.
It looks wrong.
With skateboardings.
Or
Yeah.
skateboardings or whatever you want. It looks fake. Now, there are certain tools that are built into these software, particularly to Photoshop, that will allow me to neutralize or get to a certain place or certain quality level. But really, we still do it the old-fashioned way. We mask the image. And by that, I mean every element in the image, the pool, the deck around the pool, the white umbrellas, the mountains in the background, your sweater, your red microphone top, your skin, all those are isolated separately so I can control the color on all of those, independent of each other, and blend them together like a chef making a recipe. I think of them as ingredients. And at the same time, the first initial cleanup stage, when you scan this old film that's got marks and crap and fingerprints and oil and scratches all over the surface of the actual acetate, that needs to be removed before we do the masking stage.
Okay.
That could be 30, 40 hours of work for one person.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So sometimes we'll have a piece of film, and it could be 50, 60 hours of work's gone into it, and I've pulled 10 prints to get it to where I like it. So that's really why it's not profitable.
And practical,
practical.
To do that, yeah.
Right. So it's become a labor of love, but at the same time, the return on the investment comes over time. Over the life of the restored image, then you can license it, or you do artwork, or you sell reproductions, and that's sort of how it plays for itself.
Okay. People know Marilyn through a couple of different images, because it's been a long time now. They know the one of her in the movie where she's standing over the grate and her dress is blowing up. They know the one where she's working out in the gym, I believe, somewhere, and pumping some, 10-pound bells.
Right.
What were some of the most popular ones from your father that people would readily recognize?
The ballerina is probably the most popular. She looks like she's wearing a tutu, but she's holding it up because the dress was too small.
Okay.
And the top would fall down if she wasn't holding it.
Yes.
And there's a series, that series is wonderful. And then the black sitting is very popular, a series of black and whites that they did just for themselves. The assignments that Milton got to photograph Marilyn happened only twice.
Okay.
In August of 53. And then he went back and did more work for Look magazine in October of 53. The Joseph Schenck series, which is the cover of the book with her in the bed with the gold cup, the brass cup. And in the early sittings, it was the mandolin, what we call the nude sweater, where she's kneeling wearing a sweater with nothing underneath, and a series that's called the negligee or lingerie or evening dress. Those were the first 3 series that he did for the first assignment. Out of the relationship with Joseph Schenck, at the Joseph Schenck house, her, Ben Hecht, and my old man were hanging out, living there, guests of Joseph's for the weekend, and Marilyn was telling her story from zero to date, which was 1953. And that story was then written down longhand by Ben Hecht, the great screenplay writer, and a month later, Ben gave it to her as a manuscript, and over the period of their friendship, Marilyn gave that text to my father, and that became the text for what is known as My Story.
Oh, really?
The book that's out. We own the rights to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's how that got done. In the meantime, their friendship developed, and Milton became very aware of the challenging life that she's had, to put it nicely, and abusive life that she had, and how mistreated she's been, from a child all the way through a professional career. And he reviewed her slave contract, which is what it was called.
Yes.
And he saw a way to file a lawsuit against 20th Century Fox to get her out of the contract. So in January of 54, he calls her up and says, I'm sending you a plane ticket, get on a plane, come to New York. I'm going to cover all your cost of living expenses. And for a year, she disappeared off the face of the earth. She lived in my family's home in Connecticut. She lived in my parents' apartment in New York. For a while, she lived at what was the name of the hotel? The Carlisle, in a friend's private apartment, and at the Gladstone Hotel in New York.
Okay.
All arranged through my father at the time. But she got to meet Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis, Ella Fitzgerald, Marlon Brando, who then took her to the Actors Studio. Marilyn became aware and hooked into the New York nightclub jazz scene and met authors and people of passion and art, and got away from the life of Hollywood.
Right.
And was given dignity and respect, and she was always welcome, and she was never expected to be Marilyn within the lifestyle within my family. She was a house guest. She had her own room. She had her own car. She had her own entrance and exit. And it was a freedom that she had never had before, with all of her needs covered. Life, acting lessons, singing lessons, dancing lessons, a massage every week.
Sure.
Going shopping at Saks Fifth Avenue with my mother, and my mother would say, you're wearing the clothes too tight. This is how you dress for New York.
Right.
Elegance is more important than tits and ass.
Yes.
We're going to show you how to do this. On the other hand, it wasn't that it was wrong. It was just that Marilyn was more Hollywood.
Yeah, it was the wrong setting for that.
Right. And so when you go to a black tie dinner party or a nightclub or whatnot, you want to dress chic,
a little
and elegant,
classier,
and a little classy. I guess it was like a crash course in etiquette, but Marilyn picked it up right away.
Now, this has been great. Is there a website that you have that people can go to read about your father, get the books, all of that?
Archiveimages.com, www.archiveimages.com. The book that we've just released, which is The Essential Marilyn Monroe. It's 50 sittings, which they did together over the period of 4 years in their partnership. I'm also embarking on a documentary film of my father's entire life's work. Life, look, the fashion, all the other movie stars that he photographed. Mm-hmm. And we are looking to tie that together with a producer, and I have a couple of partners who want to do museum exhibits, and then hopefully we'll do a documentary and introduce Milton to the new world.
Great.
And then his exhibition will travel for the next 10 years around the world.
Well, I hope you'll bring this new film back here to Palm Springs to debut one year.
I will, and I will send you a 12-minute pitch that I made specifically at the festival that we showed last night.
Okay.
So you can just look at that, and if you have any further questions or interest, feel free to contact me.
Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much.
That was Joshua Greene, archivist for the collection of his father, Milton Greene, and formerly Babysat by Marilyn Monroe.
Stay tuned over the spring and summer as we bring you more shows from 2020's Modernism Week in Palm Springs. You want to hang out with us at the swanky U.S. Modernist compound at Modernism Week in February 2021? Email george@usmodernist.org. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Nichiha.com/USModernist and by Angela Roll, your special agent for Modernist Houses, 919-995-0550. Okay, George, take us out.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to our past shows, discover documentation of 7,000 significant modernist houses, and access 2.8 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studio in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was produced by me, George Smart, and Robinson Earl. Cindy Stratton,
not a real name,
and Carrie Cesarino,
which is actually her real name,
research our wonderful guests. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm George Smart, and there's no Frank Sinatra tune that doesn't play well under the stars with a martini in Palm Springs. So we'll be back soon with another Fly Me to the Moon, I've Got You Under My Skin, Pennies from Heaven, Modernism Week edition of U.S. Modernist Radio. Cheers.